Nous avons donc deux intervenants. Le premier est M. Hakan Günes, maître de conférence à l'Université d'Istanbul, et qui va aborder l'eurasianisme à la périphérie, c'est-à-dire les conceptions centrasiatiques de l'eurasisme. C'est à vous pour 20 minutes.
20 minutes?
Oui,
okay, so, actually it's always so difficult, as we all know, to talk in the after lunch sessions, because the blood we need for our brain to work is somewhere around our stomach. I mean, so we have this difficulty, and I hope the coffee break helped us, I believe. Okay, so the center topic, the center phenomena that we are talking on is Eurasianism, a very complex, ambiguous concept.
Il faut l'allumer. Il n'est pas allumé.
Okay. So we all try to explain different tenets, different aspects of a phenomenon.
Je pense que si vous faites comme ça,
Yeah.
ça va servir.
I cannot speak like this.
Non?
Should I?
Alors plus fort.
You should have it
Louder.
close to your...
Yeah, I need to follow.
Non, il a besoin, il a
my...
besoin de
O zaman yüksek sesle konuş.
Okay, tamam, bağıracağız ben. Okay. So, the title of my presentation is Eurasianism at the Periphery, the Central Asian Conceptions of Eurasianism. So I will try to divide it into four parts, mainly first the conceptual part, the Eurasianism, the conceptual ambiguities, and political pragmatic uses of it. So political pragmatism and the conceptual ambiguities is the first part. And secondly, although the main topic, the focus is on the Central Asian conceptions of Eurasianism, still we need to compare it with the two other versions of it, which is the Turkish and the Russian. So Turkish, Russian, and Central Asian conceptions, the intersections and the diversifications within that. And thirdly, the Eurasianism as a pragmatic tool in Central Asia, so how they utilize this concept in their political framework. And finally, related to this third part, is Eurasianism a determining factor in present-day political map of Eurasia, or Central Asia more specifically? So let's start. Actually, while listening all the presenters, it reminded me a lot of different frameworks, names, doctrines, and I would like to share my perception on that while explaining those parts. First of all, the conceptual part. Okay, what are those conceptual ambiguities? What are those different approaches to the concept? In order to locate the Central Asian conceptions of Eurasianism, a highly vague concept, we should better first look at the different Eurasianism conceptualizations. For a shortcut outline, I would refer to main bifurcations or diversifications in the literature. But also we need to identify the Russian political stance in this regard, Putin, Lavrov, and Peskov's statements, that those might be really useful to identify different versions of the Eurasianism. Because, because of the point, the focus we have chosen, we mostly explain a version of it. But I would like to start with the wide array of Eurasianism. But I know the time limit, so I have to be a bit quicker. So, though it is one might argue that we can just omit this concept, because instead of different versions of Eurasianism, one might use different concepts like sovereignism or fascism, right-wing fascism, etc. For each and every version of it, you have in the political literature different concepts. So why still we use this concept? Still in a way, just like nationalism. Fascism is also nationalism, Bolivarism, Kemalism is also nationalism, which do not look like. But still there is something make them to be called as nationalism. So in that sense, still we can use it. And I would like to also mostly focus on the philosophical background that is utilized by different versions of the political Eurasianism. So, but roughly speaking, I will address to this definition, the most flexible one. it could be defined as a set of cultural, philosophical, and political concepts centered on the idea that Eurasia has a civilizational identity and a developmental path. So here I would like to underline the concept of civilizational identity. This is really important for the masses, for the millions, but especially for the people living in the countries like Russia and Turkey. And in similar, many of the Balkan nations has this question for centuries, at least 1.5 centuries. So that is a very enduring problem, the question of identity. So we cannot reduce this. That would be, for example, a reduction if we think like Perinçek or someone else is representing this big question. They are part of it. Well, in many of the well-known Eurasianists or the people that are associated with Eurasianism are like just charlatan, like Dugin or Perinçek. So maybe we can just forget about them, but still, they are part of the picture. So we have to talk about them. So my first remark on this civilizational formulation of Eurasianism is, it reminds me Huntington's Clash of Civilization. Remember when it published first? 1994. Exactly the year that Dugin started to publicize on the same subject. Remember the map? I actually want you to, if possible, show some map of the clash of civilization. I mean, the civilization, like he says, like 7 or 8, but mostly based on religious and cultural dimensions. And also think about the classical Eurasianist formulation of the world map based on the civilizational spheres. They're very much similar, but not that exactly the same. For example, Turkey in the Huntington's map is part of the Islamic realm, Islamic civilization. In the Eurasianist, they are not. They are part of either the steppe culture in the classical Eurasian, like the Verdiaya Trubetskoy, or even not in the Gumilia version, it's more like the steppe, not including like the Orthodox world, for example. Okay, so there are, and the second thing, no state Eurasianism. There is no state that is really advocating, at least officially, Eurasianism. But still, that is a very influential concept, doctrine, ideology, element in many state actors' paradigms. So it is. It could be also identified as an ideological entrism, and it survives in different ideological frameworks in political programs. So let me just address to some of the bifurcations, some of the different versions of Eurasianism. To list, first of all, I would like to start with the classical versus neo-Eurasianism. So there is the classical Eurasianism and the neo-Eurasianism. And within the second bifurcation is within the classical Eurasianism, the early classical and the late. Okay, this is maybe too much informative and like encyclopedia explanations. But there is a significance of that we need to talk. That, for example, how we are going to locate or identify Putin's Eurasianism. Okay, is it a classical, neoclassical, or Gumiliev, so late classical one? So because they have different conceptions, though associated with the same concept of Eurasianism. Philosophical versus political one. Geopolitical Eurasianism versus the philosophical one. So there are different, really, conceptions of it. And also, even in the modern day use of the term, we see a difference between the great power Eurasianism, if it is advocated by Russia or by Turkey, and the countries that are related to that. So the smaller states, medium or smaller states, they have a different approach to the very same program and paradigm. So, just not to forget, for example, in 1969, the military elite in Turkey reminds me not the Duginian version of Eurasianism. It reminds me rather of Euro-Asian. So Euro-Asianism. It's different than, I mean, it's resemble to each other, but they are different. And it reminds me Charles de Gaulle, for example, more than this new right-wing fascist Dugin. In many cases, not all of them. I mean, I exclude Pericek. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the Turkish military elite. Never wanted to leave NATO, want to stay in Europe, and want to keep the very ideological framework of the founding framework of the Turkish Republic, Kemalism, wants to stay in the Western. So Turkish version of Eurasianism, if there is such a approach, has a different answer to this civilizational question. So where we are, who we are. Okay, this question answered in a different way by the Turks in general. Okay, the Turks are a very vague term again, but they, I mean, the answer is different in the Turkish version, I believe, at least in the Kemalist version. Culturally more Eastern, but politically more Western. But Russians prefer another version, I mean, in general. So we can talk on this, the debate part. So there is, can we go to the picture? I would, from that point on, well, last point, there is a difference within this classical Eurasianist and the earlier Eurasianists were conceiving or depicting a different world for the Eurasia. It was covering, including countries like Greece, Serbia, Bulgaria. It was more based on the Orthodox world than the convergence of Turkish and Russian world, so Turkic and the Slavic world. So it is it's one of the differences. And Gumilev just changed the picture in the by 1950s on, and he stressed, I mean, he mostly underlined that the Russian civilization is a byproduct of, just like the Turkic civilization, not the Turkish Anatolian civilization, but the Turkic world, is a product. It created, emerged within the steppe culture. So the steppe culture is the reference point, and he has rather milder explanations. Now let's go to a case that, yes, this picture. So Monday, I guess, or no, Sunday. So last week, when Devlet Bahçeli, the leader of the Nationalist Movement Party, Devlet Bahçeli, presented a map to Erdogan, the President Erdogan, a map of the Turkic world. Well, sometimes it is translated as Turkish world, and sometimes it's Turkic world. So there is a debate there as well, which included Russia's southern regions and some bulk Siberia and Altai region. But okay, can we go to the other picture, or we can leave it here? I don't know. So, I mean, this is not a real picture of the Turkish-speaking areas, but in the middle of the Sakha part, in the yellow upper part, actually in between there's Buryatia, for example, which is not Turkic. So it's, I mean, it's full of mistakes from a Turkological point of view, first of all. But this is not the question. What made this issue interesting is the response by Peskov, the speaker of the Kremlin, of Putin. And Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said on after this this map appeared on social media, he responded in a very interesting way. Peskov said, "Our Turkish partners are cherishing the idea of Turkic unity, and it is normal. But the only thing I regret is that this map doesn't have a big red star in the center of Turkic world. And this center is located not in Turkey, but on Russia's territory in the Altai." As a Turkologist, he's a Turkologist, by the way, and he speaks very well Turkish. Altai is a sacred place for any Turk because it is where they originated from. You can take it from me as a Turkologist, so I add something. So my question is, what he wanted, I mean, what was the aim of this statement? Is Peskov's statement on Turkish world map a self-confident call for a challenge, a competition, over the patronage over Eurasia and the Turkic world, or a critique of the new Turkish moves towards Turkic world, to Central Asia, or a call for cooperation, a call for Turkish, Russo-Turkish allies, or all of them? So we can answer this question altogether, but I believe the last one. So it is open, but it reflects the self-confidence, and also it reflects the Gumilevian version of it. And I would like to continue with the additional notes from Sergei Lavrov's statements and articles, where he also underlined the Russian identity and political outlook and civilizational characteristics on the basis of Gumilev's explanation of Eurasia. We have a similar approach also by Putin. I can give you some examples, but I think we don't have enough time.
Yes.
Yeah, so I will just...
5 minutes.
Oh, really, I have to go really skip many parts. Okay, I thought I have like 10 more minutes. Okay, so mainly the Russian political elite, Putin and his circle, is advocating a soft and milder version of Eurasianism, not necessarily reflecting ideas like the Dugin's version of Eurasianism. So they are trying to negotiate with the West, and they are also trying to utilize this, try to use this outlook, this paradigm, to have a common ground for their near-abroad policy, and also to provide an ideological framework for the non-Slavic and non-Christian people of the Russian Federation. There are 22 autonomous regions in Russian Federation, and the bigger ones are, as you know, Tatarstan, Bashkortostan, Buryatia, all of them. So, and when we look at the statements of the Grand Mufti of Bashkortostan, which represents the Dukhovny Upravlение, the spiritual board of the Russian Muslims, or the statements of the president of Tatarstan, how they approach this question of Eurasianism. Well, they agree with this Gumilevian understanding of the Eurasianism. It's a soft, mild, medium ground for them to have a reconciliation under new conditions. In terms of, since I have 3 minutes, I would like to conclude. Okay, let's close this. Well, for the Central Asian, Nazarbayev, Kerimov, and former president of Kyrgyzia, Askar Akayev, and then his predecessor, Kurmanbek Bakiyev, and the others, so Niyazov and the others. So for them, mainly, the idea of Eurasianism is a ground that give them an opportunity to legitimize their authoritarian position. On the one hand, this is the first part, because in that point they are much closer to the Duginian explanation of Eurasianism. Probably Sinan will talk on that. It's just like what Huntington described the civilizations. Okay, so liberalism, the values that the Western civilization is grounded on. So the liberalism, free market, and secularism, etc. So he proposed the contrary concepts for that. And Dugin argues that we need a Eurasian democracy. A Eurasian democracy means a democracy in which you don't need any kind of elections. Okay, so he's kind of against the elections. Because we are not liberal, because we are based, our civilization is based on община, on the communities. So it's kind of, I don't know, social fascism, whatever. 2 minutes. Okay, so we will continue with in the debate part. So they first of all they use in that respect, but secondly, that is in terms of geopolitical conception or formulation of their Eurasianist foreign policy, Central Asian states' position is not a preferred one. It is just an outcome. And this outcome is the result of the Western policy's failure. They waited like 10 or even 15 years to be integrated to the West. Don't forget it. Okay? And they were open to that. So this is just a compulsory result. And for that reason, they are on the one hand quite Eurasianist, okay, in terms of geopolitical approach, but on the other hand, this is just a zorunlu compulsory result of the last 30 years. Okay, that was not a preference. So they are trying to balance in their political formulations, balance the idea of this Russocentric Eurasianism with their national interest, and so that the Gumilievian version really helped them. Fortunately, time is out, and we can continue in the question parts. Thank you.
Marie.
Eh bien, merci. Thank you, Hakan Günes, for this extraordinary, deep vision of, because you went until Gumilyov. So, but in fact, all this looks quite unclear, because in fact the states you are talking about, the Central Asia states, for example, they have no cooperation between themselves. So if you are in Kazakhstan, for example, and you want to go to Uzbekistan, very difficult, almost impossible. You want to go from Kyrgyzstan to Uzbekistan, it's even worse. So I mean, what could be their common values, the common values of this Eurasianist tendency or concept, or what? What are their values? Because I understand that they are opposed to the Western values, but what do they claim? For example, Dugin said no elections, but is it a general trend? Is it and then, do you think really that such a movement could succeed in terms of ideology? That it could be appealing for the young generation, for example?
To start with the last part of your question, I mean, it is not appealing anymore for the new generations, just like the new right ideologies in the United States or in Britain or in France or in Turkey. The new generations, the younger generations, are interested in more individualistic and more liberal ideas, and so this is not persuading. I mean, those old versions of authoritarianism with some new clothes is not persuading them, first of all. And secondly, I mean, can we just see the map of the Eurasia and the countries that? Okay, I mean, if we look at the regional organizations in the not that one. Okay. I mean, the Central Asian countries, especially the three, I mean, they are in the part of the political. Yeah. So I mean, so at the core, at the center, there are two organizations: the Eurasian Economic Union, Russia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Armenia, and Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan will be the next one. And in terms of Collective Security Treaty Organization, CSTO, then the same set plus Uzbekistan. And if we look at the Shanghai, so still we see the same group of Central Asian states plus China. And now Pakistan and India is a new thing that we cannot talk about. That it's an extra development. So what we see that, I mean, the Russian-centric Eurasianism, if you can use this term, is quite successful there. And what was the Western approach, including the Turkish approach, was to create a common Central Asia economic sphere, but it failed. I mean, that was the idea that I talked in the beginning. It failed in the first 15 years. They give the credit. I mean, it failed. Mainly, the biggest failure is the Nabucco. Okay, because of the disagreements between Turkish, Italian, Austrian states and all of us, it failed, and they were quite ready for that. And this is that's not a preference; that's an outcome. That's why I conclude like this. And the disagreements between the Central Asian states is growing. And just remember the tension on the border of Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan this summer. there was a small-scale war there, and there was a massacre, a genocide, in the Uzbek populated areas of Kyrgyzstan in the southern part of there.
It was in 2010.
2010, exactly 20 years
I was
after
there.
the first. Really,
I was around.
I was around, unfortunately, yeah. So
And
I mean,
what did
it
you
is
mean when you said that this occurred? They killed each other. And
actually, yeah.
nothing happens. I mean, for example,
They didn't kill
when
each
we
other. I mean,
talk
the Kyrgyz
about
killed the Uzbeks.
when we talk about the Shanghai Cooperation, for example, Shanghai as a program, as for example, fighting against.
Yeah, they did nothing, and especially at that time exactly, Kazakhstan was the president of the OIC,
really,
remember, and they just closed the border.
Yeah.
That was the only approach there. I mean, Kazakh and Kyrgyz, they are the same people with different names. Okay, and what they did
It's
in
not the
this
same
case,
people. Kazakh and Kyrgyz, you
they are
said?
the same people.
Oh no, it's
they are
not the same language.
I'm sure they are
It's
the
not
same.
the same
It's just
language.
two letters.
Right, it's very different. Very different.
I'm sorry, I'm also one of the experts. I lived there for a long time. Yeah, exactly the same. Just dialect. I mean, between Ankara and Istanbul, like Kırmızı and Kırmızı. That's all. Kazakh and Kyrgyz are the same people. But what they did, I mean, the problem is that they didn't help, even in terms of humanitarian parts. They just closed the borders, unfortunately. Yeah. This. I mean, the Central Asian authoritarian leaders' perception of Eurasianism is on the cultural level similar to maybe Gumilyevin version, but in terms of internal domestic aspects of Eurasianism, it is more close to the Duginian version, so quite illiberal, against representational democracy, so kind of proposing a new form of Eurasian democracy, which nobody knows. But I think at the same time, I mean, those similarities, they're quite dynamic. I mean, they could change. I mean, that's why I wanted to give some examples in what point that kind of Eurasianism is like De Gaullism, and in what sense this kind of Eurasianism is like the clash of civilization. Okay, in what sense it's like fascism. Okay, so we have all of them, and we cannot
like
put. I didn't give those examples just to show you how different kind of Eurasianism could be found in the encyclopedia, but also mainly I wanted to show that the differences are important, and we have to be more specific in each case. That was the point.
Oui.
When you compared the classical Eurasianism originated in Russia, beginning of the 20th century, and the neo-Eurasianism of now, and we can use it in plural because there are almost as many of versions of Eurasianism as there are countries in which we talk about it. I think you said something very interesting, is that for my perception, the main difference between the classical and the neo-Eurasianism is that the first one, classical one, was very ideologically founded, and not only in one aspect, but culturally, philosophically, economically, geographically, etc., etc. And now most of the Eurasianist currents, or the ones which are called like that, are only one-dimensional, which is geopolitics. And when this is applied to a geopolitical doctrine, is that people present their vision of geopolitics and they just call it Eurasianism because it has an appeal, or it can address some people and everything. So that's why I think we see as many of different current Eurasian currents as there are different Eurasian visions of geopolitics. So in Kazakhstan it's different. I don't know Kazakhstan at all, but I imagine that in other circles of Kazakhstan there are different Eurasianist visions of Kazakhstan strategy. So that's also only in the specific case of Turkey we see different Eurasianist visions, because they're just people who have different strategical visions for Turkey, and they use the term Eurasianism, because the term is never defined on the contrary of the classical Eurasianism, which was actually.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point of Dugin, who recuperated this this word, this term, and used it only to promote his strategical vision, which has pretty nothing in common with the classical Eurasia, I think.
Well, it's a very useful.
It's very interesting.
And I think one of the most interesting case with regard to this regionalism, cultural regionalism, is the Hungarian case. Orban, there is a Jobbik party there, right-wing, nationalist, even fascist, I don't know, maybe neo-fascist, whatever. They have like 25-30% of votes in the country, and they lost a bit, but Orban represents their vision as well, and Hungary became an observer member of the Türkeneşi. The new name is the Council of Turkish States. Hungary, because their self-identification is Turanian, the steppe people. So it's really interesting. I mean, I believe a very interesting part. I think the yellow jackets in France. I did new generations. Okay, there are different visions of them, but people are in an age of uncertainty. Okay, people are following and looking at that, just like this vaccine issue. Okay, people like grand theories, conspiracy theories, because we are living in an age of uncertainty, and there is an appealing part in that. I mean, it's a fake answer, for sure, but what attracts people is the complexity of the age.